The university's admissions centre acknowledges and pays respect to the past, present and future traditional custodians and elders of this nation. Hello, my name's Trudy Noller and I'm the Community Engagement Manager here at UAK, and tonight we will discuss all things UAK, of course. The topics we will be talking on will be, of course, what is UAK? We'll also have an overview of the ATAR, who can apply via UAK, everything about applications, preferences, and of course, facts about offers. So what is UAK? The University's Admissions Centre processes applications for 29 different institutions across New South Wales and the ACT. We also administer applications for our access schemes, which I'll talk about in a moment. But of course, the one thing we are most known for is the fact that we calculate all New South Wales HSC students' ATAR. So let's talk about the ATAR. Before we talk about some of the aspects of the ATAR, I want to describe to you the difference between HSC marks and the ATAR, because once you understand there's a difference, it's much easier to understand why the ATAR may look the way it does when your son or daughter receives it at the end of the year. So after your student has, of course, completed all their exams, NESA, or the New South Wales Education Standards Authority, is going to report to them every HSC course that they have completed and the HSC mark that they have achieved for each course. Now, of course, those HSC marks is going to tell them how well they have performed in each course. Now, UAK, using the same data, so we still use the moderated assessment mark and raw exam marks that NESA uses to calculate an HSC mark, we use those marks to then determine the ATAR, which is, of course, one number that tells us about where each student is positioned across the whole state. So it's performance versus position. Now, we often talk about it like being in a running race, and that is that all Year 12 students in New South Wales are in that race. And your son or daughter may get to the very end of that race and they think, wow, I've just done my personal best, and let's hope that that's what they're feeling at the end. But of course, they may get to the end of that race standing on the finish line and think, well, hey, I've done my personal best, but I'm actually positioned in the middle of the pack. So their performance in the race may look very different to their position in the race. Yeah, so it's fairly easy and straightforward to understand that. Now, the only thing that a student can control in this whole scenario is how well they're going to perform. They cannot control their ATAR because they can't control how everybody else has performed. So it is really about just doing the best they possibly can in, of course, the courses that they have taken on. Now, you know, as parents, I know we're always trying to encourage our sons and daughters to do the best they can, and that's all we can do. And let's hope that they, of course, you know, take on board what you say to them and help them, you know, when you're helping them try to get through this time or this period. So what is the ATAR? The Australian Tertiary Admissions rank, of course, is just that. It is a rank. It's not a mark or a score. It will not define them as a student for the rest of their academic career. It is just there for the sole purpose of universities to select students on. Now, a lot of people will ask, well, why do they need an ATAR? Why do the universities need an ATAR to select students on? Well, universities, of course, have, you know, lots of courses, but, you know, not every single student can get into their course. Now, if you look at the course selection on the UAK website, you will see that they all have a different entry point, or we call it the lowest selection rank for a course. Now, some courses may have higher selection ranks than other courses because that selection rank is determined by supply and demand. Now, so universities can control the number of students are getting into those courses. They need something, and that is why the ATAR is around, so that they can help control the numbers getting into the courses, you know, especially those courses that are very high demand. So what's it used for? It's just used by universities to select students in. Once they're into university, nobody ever asks about it again. So how's it calculated? Now, so if your student in your family is in year 12 this year, there's slightly different rules for students who are in year 11 or year 10 or so forth. But for this year's year 12 students, the calculation is based on 10 units of study, which must include 2 units of English, which is the compulsory course, and can only include 2 units of what we classify as Category B courses. So that's that VET framework course that has the HSC optional exam. Now, they must sit that exam for it to be there for inclusion in the calculation. So once again, 10 units of study, must have 2 units of English included, and only 2 units of Category B courses can be included. Now, if your student is in year 11, then the rules have changed for them and anybody coming forward from that time. And that is that we still need 10 units of study, but we need 10 units of board developed courses because we have decategorized the courses. So they're no longer Category A or Category B. It's just 10 units of board developed courses, but once again must include 2 units of English because that's the compulsory course. Now, when we do the calculation, we're not using HSC marks, we're using scaled marks, all right? So scaled marks look very different to HSC marks, all right? Now, scaling is just part of the process, okay? It is the first step, and it's done so that we can take away the difference between patterns of study amongst students, so that we can, of course, create a more even playing field, so that everyone can be considered fairly. Now, I'm not going to go much into scaling today because, as I said, we're going to have an ATAR webinar in a few, further down the track, which I hope you will join us for. But what I do want to say is one of the questions we always get is what happens if the ATAR doesn't work for students to get in? What if their ATAR is not enough to get them to where they want to be? I would say tell them not to panic, all right? Hopefully, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, you've done a lot of research, so you'll know that there are a lot of pathways into university, lots and lots of pathways. But before we go on, we do have a couple of questions, and I do want to address them. And we have a question from Anita, and she's asking, is the class a student takes for a particular subject factored into their ATAR calculation at school? Meaning, if the entire class does or doesn't achieve a band 6 in the subject, does it increase or decrease their ATAR score? No, that's not how it works. When we do the calculation, it's not school by school, it's across the whole state, okay? So it really just depends on a student's performance in the course, so their individual performance. They've also asked, or Anita has also asked, if a student achieves a mark of 99% in the subject, but the remaining students in the class receive below 50, would it decrease the first student with a high mark, would it affect their ATAR calculation? No, that's not how it works once again. So Anita, it's all good. If you've got a high achieving student, they'll be a high achieving student. One other thing to take note of is that the school that a student attends doesn't come into the calculation. It's just the data, the marks that go in to calculate the ATAR. We do not put school, we do not put address, we do not put regions. It's just about the marks. I have another question here from Lauren, and she is asking that she had heard on the grapevine that children that compete in representative sports are offered additional ATAR points. Can I advise on that? Students who are competing at state or national level, whether it be a sport or a performance, they can apply directly to the university for consideration, And yes, they may receive a couple of adjustment points, not ATAR points. So it doesn't increase their ATAR, it just increases their selection ranking to a course. So whatever additional points they give, it will sit on top of the ATAR to change the selection into the course at that particular university. Another question we got from Dimmy, and the question is, and I'm sorry I have to read this, the question is, if my daughter decides to go to uni 6 months after graduating high school, will her ATAR still be relevant? Absolutely. Yes, it will still be relevant. She would still be considered like a Year 12 student. And what if she decides 1 or 2 years later that she wants to attend uni? What would need to happen to make this possible? Does her ATAR score still apply? Yes, it would still apply. Now, if, of course, your daughter went on to do some TAFE studies, then, of course, it would not just be the TAFE study, the ATAR that would be considered, it would also be the TAFE studies. So once a student leaves school, once they start gathering different qualifications, they can all go towards entry into university. So they were really good questions, but we'll move on because I want to get on to who can apply to UAK through UAK. It's a really good question. Okay, so let's move on to who can apply through UAK. So all students who are completing an Australian Year 12 qualification or IB can apply for university through UAK, okay? So we're just talking domestic students at the moment. So all those students can apply through UAK. A domestic applicant is someone who is, of course, an Australian or New Zealand citizen. They are either also a permanent resident of Australia or the holder of an Australian humanitarian residence visa. So those people are all classified as domestic students. All other students who are completing an Australian Year 12 or IB are classified as international students. So they're international students. Now, those international students, of course, who are completing an Australian Year 12 or IB can still apply through UAK, and they will be applying through the international portal of the UAK website. Whereas everybody else, any other student who is a domestic student, of course, would have to apply through us anyway for consideration into any of our institutions across New South Wales or the ACT. So all other international students, so if you're listening to this and you're from another country and you are an international student, you would apply direct to your university of choice. If you are a domestic student with an overseas qualifications, and this is students who are, citizens or permanent residents, but you're completing, let's say, the GCE A-levels from the UK or the SATs from the States or any other equivalent Year 12 qualification from other countries around the world, then you can still apply through UAK, but you're just applying as a domestic student with an international qualification. Now, we don't technically put you in as a Year 12 student because we don't have, your information, which includes things like student numbers and things like that. But that's not to say you won't be considered as a Year 12 student. You're just not going to have those numbers that we would expect students here in Australia to have to log into our system. So when you apply through UAK, you're just going to go in and say, no, you're not a current Year 12 student here in Australia, and it will then force you through to give us all of your details and the details of the qualification that you are completing and so on. So that's how that works. Now, when we come to UAK applications, UAK applications for 2025 intake, so semester 1 2025, will open online on the 3rd of April. So that's only next week. I can't believe it. It seems to have come around very quickly. Students from New South Wales and the ACT will receive an email from UAK at 9 a.m. on that day with their UAK PIN and information about how to apply. Okay, so that will all come out to you at 9 a.m. If you can't find it in your normal inbox, please check your junk mail. If you have any issues whatsoever and you haven't received it, please contact our customer service office. They will certainly help you. So mums and dads out there, please encourage your student, the student in your household, to get onto their emails to find out whether their PIN has arrived. Now, if it hasn't arrived and they have to contact us, please get them to call us because we won't be able to give you their PIN. It acts like a secure PIN, like your bank PIN. So we do need to talk to them and qualify them so that we can give them the information over the phone. Students applying will need, of course, their NESA or BSSS number, if they're from New South Wales or the ACT, and their UAK PIN to log in to our website. And once they log in with those details, all their name and address and so forth will pop up. Now, one little thing for interstate and IB students. They will, of course, or you will, of course, if you're listening as a student, but your sons and daughters from interstate or IB will still use their student number, so their IB number or their state's interstate student number. But their PIN will be their date of birth, so it'll be day, month that they will use to actually log into our system. But you will not be able to log in on the 3rd of April, okay? So the reason being is we have to wait for our interstate counterparts or the IBO to provide us with your data so that we have you ready in our system to be able to log in. Now, it will take a little bit of time for that to happen, but we will notify all the schools when each state's data will be available for your sons or daughters to apply. So hold tight. As I said, we will contact your school and say it is time, and I'm sure they'll really relay that message to your student or through the school's emails, which I know a lot of schools have. So moving forward, students will also need a USI, so the unique student identifier code, to actually lodge their application. It will be a mandatory field, so don't wait till very last minute to get it. Go into to the USI website. If you just Google it, it comes up fairly quickly, and it only takes a couple of minutes to get one. So get that USI so it's ready for when you apply. Now, that USI, of course, is going to link you with, of course, your course and your HECSTET and all those fun things that you'll carry forward with you for the rest of your life. All right. So if you're a student who's applying through UAK and you want to be considered for the school's recommendation scheme, which is our early entry scheme, which I'll talk about in a minute, you would have to lodge your application before the 16th of September. That's when those applications will close. But if you're not applying for the school's recommendation scheme, but are still applying through UAK, you would need to apply by the 30th of September. The 30th of September is what we call early bird close. It's got nothing to do with early entry. It's just about the fact that the fee will change from the early bird fee of $80 to over $200 if you apply after the 30th of September. Now, a lot of students ask us, and even mums and dads ask us, well, what if our student doesn't know what they want to apply for just yet? It's very early in the piece. You know, how can they submit an application? I would say even if they're not quite sure what they want to study, lodge the application with just one course preference. And then, of course, later on that they can go in and change those preferences. They're not locked in when they submit the application, all right? So that's one thing to sort of take note of, and I would certainly relay that to them and encourage them to get that application in because, you know, as we know, as I know with my own daughters, you know, they always, you know, tap on our wallets to pay for their applications. And I know that you and I only want to pay that early bird fee. All right, so for uni for entry in 2025, we do run by a calendar of dates. We do every single year. So if you're the student in your family is not in Year 12 now, but is in Year 12 next year or the year after or whatnot, we do run to a calendar of dates that is very similar from year to year. So like this year, as I said already, the applications will open on the 3rd of April, which is next Wednesday. Then, of course, the next important date are for students who are applying for SRS or the Schools Recommendation Scheme, and those applications will close on the 16th of September. The next important date, of course, is the early bird close, which I just mentioned, which is the 30th of September, and that's when, of course, the application fee will change. Then the next important date for Year 12 students will be for November round 1, for close of change of preference, which is the 1st of November. Now, the close of preference date is when students would have to have their course preferences in order to be considered for an SRS offer, which will be released on the 8th of November, which is a Friday. Okay, so close of preference is the 1st of November to be considered for an early entry offer on the 8th of November. The next important date, of course, is ATAR Day, which I always love because I love talking to students about what's happening with their ATAR and where they're going from here. So the 18th, Thursday the 18th of December is HSC and ATAR release. Now, HSC is always released like at 6:30 in the morning, whereas ATAR is released at about 9 a.m. Now, this year, because we've got a very tight turnaround so that we can give offers before Christmas, students will need to get their preferences in order by 11:59 p.m. on the 18th of December so that they can be considered in the first ATAR-based offer round, which will be released on the 23rd of December. Now, one tip, parents, to you to encourage your students. On the 18th, I'm expecting that many universities will have information days so that you can go and visit and make some last-minute choices around what it is that they want to study. So I would get along to those just to brush up and really get some more in-depth information about those courses that they may be looking at. Now, after December, the next offer round will be in January, and January round 1, the close of preference will be the 2nd of January. And then, of course, the next offer round will be on the 9th of January. Now, we have 2 offer rounds per month from November all the way through to March, and students can be considered in each and every one if they're applying for the multiple entry points, SRS and ATAR. All right, now let's move on. I want to talk about the other applications that students can apply under. And the first one, and they all open on the same day, they all open on the 3rd of April, but the first access scheme I want to talk about is the Schools Recommendation Scheme, mainly because I've already half talked about it. And the Schools Recommendation Scheme is a centralised application for early entry. This is where there is roughly around a dozen institutions to participate, and what they're looking for to consider this your son's or daughter for entry is their Year 11 results and the school's recommendation. Now, I can hear some parents go, what, Year 11 results? What does that mean? Does that mean my student in Year 11 should be applying now? No, wait, no, that's not how it works. Students have to be in Year 12 to apply. It's just that we are using Year 11 results to make early offers prior to the ATAR being released. So for students in New South Wales and the ACT, when they've completed their application, they just have to submit it and that's it, because UAK will retrieve their Year 11 results from either NESA or the BSSS, okay? And that's because we've got, relationships with those those organisations. Then we will contact your school to do their recommendation. So you really just have to put the application in. So mums, dads, encourage them to put one of these applications in. And then, of course, they can sit back with their feet up because UAK will do the rest of the work. Students who are applying for the school's recommendation scheme from interstate or from, they're doing the IB, then once you submit your SRS application, which of course is part of your uni application, you will need to supply your Year 11 results. Now, there will be very good instructions and a pro forma if you need one to actually get that information for us, and then you'll just upload it to your UAK application. We still, however, will contact your school direct to get the school rating of you. So that's fairly straightforward as well. But we, of course, as I said before, will close those applications in mid-September, so make sure you get it in, and you can then be considered in the first November offer round. Now, when the offers are released, you, of course, can only get one unconditional offer. Now, an unconditional offer is just that the university looked at, your recommendation, your Year 11 results, and said, yeah, great, we like the look of you. Here is your offer. Thank you very much. And you can just accept that offer and, enroll if they ask you to enroll or whatever it is that you need to do. If, however, on that day, you may even get an email, and an email that tells you that you have got several conditional offers. Now, it's the only time in the admission cycle that this will happen, that you may get conditional offers. And a conditional offer is not technically a full offer. It's just a letter of intent that tells a student that, hey, yes, we're interested, but we want to see a little bit more from them. And in general, it will be a minimum ATAR. So that means that your son or daughter will have to have that course still listed in their preference list when ATAR is being released. Okay, so because if you've then met the ATAR requirement, then you may get an offer to that course, on that first ATAR-based offer round. Now, a lot of students will ask me, does that mean I have to have that course listed as my first preference? If it is your dream course, absolutely, because that's what you really want. But if it's not your dream course, then just have it somewhere listed in your preference or in your preferences, so that if you don't get into your dream course or any other course that you have listed above it, then you will get an offer to that conditional offer that was given. Okay, so that's early entry through the UAK system. Now, I know that there are many, many other direct applications to universities for early entry, and you can apply for, or students can apply for as many as they like, but I would highly recommend that they put in a UAK application, including the school's recommendation application, and that way they're widening their options and they're getting more benefit from each and every application. Now, one thing I would say, and please remind your student that's in your family to please don't put the same preference on your UAK application as you do the direct application, okay? Because you can't get an offer to the same course twice. So if, of course, you don't get an offer to that course through the direct application, then you can put it over onto your UAK application to be considered in the traditional format of ATAR. All right, let's move on to the next access scheme, and that's the Educational Access Scheme. And the Educational Access Scheme is special consideration for students who have experienced some form of hardship or circumstances that has happened to them through years 11 and 12 that has been beyond their choice or choosing, where it has affected their school grades. Now, there are many types of circumstances that they can apply under, ranging from refugee status right through to long-term medical or disability. And of course, students can apply for as many or as little types of circumstances that they feel is best for them. Okay. So if you're helping your son and daughter with this, make sure they go through each type of circumstance so that they can tick the box that equates to them and their personal circumstances. And then at the end, it will ask them to download the document package, which clearly states to them that they will need to supply specific documentation to support their claims. Now, for many students, it would be an applicant statement. It could be a medical impact statement, which has to come from a registered practitioner, or a educational impact statement, which must come from your school. Okay, we want it to come from your school. So parents, just be aware that they don't have to upload these documents straight away. You do have time to gather them. I know that many parents worry about getting appointments with doctors and so forth. So they do have right up until the middle of November to get those documents to us so that we can get that application assessed in time for the first ATAR-based offer round, because we do use Educational Access Scheme, or EAS, for those offers and not early entry. Something that you're probably asking, well, is what does this actually do for my son or daughter? This application, as I said, is special consideration. And if you are made eligible under this scheme, we will tell you on ATAR Day. It will say, yes, you've been made eligible. It will list every institution as to who's going to consider it or not consider it. And although it's not a guarantee of entry, it can help a student just get over the line if their ATAR is not quite enough. Now, it usually comes in the form of a couple of adjustment points. Now, we don't provide the number of points, mainly because it's a case-by-case sort of basis and because of the sheer nature of this application, okay? So when you research all the different adjustment points on the university websites, they will tell you how many they cap their points at. So just be conservative. Don't think that they're going to give you many points, because, let's say you got an ATAR of 70 and the course you want to get into has an entry point of 90. They're not going to give you that many points. But they might just give you a few, which might just get you over the line. Now, some universities don't give points. Some, it's just a place for those students. So that's one other reason why we can't sort of say you're going to get X amount of points, because it's different from institution to institution. Right. The other scheme that we have, or the other access scheme, is the equity scholarships. And this is, of course, about financial hardship and money to help students once they get into university. Now, equity scholarships for the majority of students who apply is about being on some kind of Centrelink benefits and demonstrating their financial hardship. And of course, there are other circumstances that they can certainly apply under. Now, not all Year 12 students may be in this predicament. However, if they're at university and find that they do have circumstances and financial hardship that they need help with, then they can apply for that whilst they're at university, because this application is not just open to Year 12 students, it's also open to continuing uni students. So if you've already got a son or a daughter that's at uni that, needs some help, I would have a look at this. Now, apart from equity scholarships, the universities have millions of dollars to give away. And of course, they always come to us at the end and say, we've still got millions of dollars to give away because students don't apply. And the reason why they don't apply, and you probably know your sons and daughters better than I do, but I know what my daughters were like, and they would always look in the mirror and say, hey, I'm not applying for that because they're never going to pick me. Now, please encourage them to apply. They may be the only person, and that means that they may end up with, tens of thousands of dollars in their pocket, which is sort of better for them than the university, I would certainly say. So I would encourage them to get onto the university websites, apply for all their scholarships. Don't hesitate, just apply, because you just never know what will happen. And once again, the money is better in their pocket. It will certainly help them with their hundreds of dollars that they're going to need for textbooks and so forth. All right, so that's the access schemes. What I would like to talk to you about now is, of course, how do students investigate all courses? How do they choose their courses? I mean, it's a really hard thing. Many students at the end of Year 12 are still, pondering over what it is that they want to study. I know my youngest daughter, she pondered over all sorts of courses. She wasn't real sure what she was going to do. And, in the end, her ATAR was not so great, which, I know what she was like you will know how your student is. And so she took a pathway course. But in any case, how do they choose their courses? I would certainly recommend that they investigate all course possibilities, meaning, okay, they may have something specific in mind, but what if they don't get into that course? What else would they study? What if they were like my daughter and their ATAR was, not so fantastic? What pathway courses could they take? Many of our institutions have what we call diploma courses. I think they're a fantastic opportunity for students because they can get in and they're studying on campus, and it's basically like doing the first year of their degree. And in many cases, students will then get guaranteed entry into the degree and get full credit in some cases, which means they're then starting in the second year of their undergraduate course, which is what my daughter did. Now, she's a little older now, and she's just gone through and finished her second degree. So, Dr. Carl said to me once, the first degree is just the pathway to their second. And of course, that could be the case for your family member as well. But going back to it, investigate all course possibilities. Also, explore all universities that offer the courses of interest to keep your options open. We have some students that come to us and have got one university in mind and one only, and they don't explore others, and then they get to the end and they find that maybe they're not going to make entry, so what are they going to do? And they get a little bit worried, or they get really upset about that. However, if you encourage your student to get out to the open days and explore all the different universities, then their options are opened and they know where it is that they may be able to study the course that they're wanting. I always get asked, so what's the best university? The one you can get into, to be quite frank. They're all fantastic. They've all got great facilities and so forth. So once again, explore every single university and keep your options open. Of course, to do a little bit more in-depth research, I would definitely get onto the university websites and check out their handbooks so that you can get, or your son or daughter can get a little bit more information about the course content, because I know that can make a bit of a difference, because you may have the same course at 5 different universities, but the content of the course might be slightly different, and sometimes it can attract students in different ways. Attending the university open days is a great thing. When you get there, you can, of course, question lecturers and students from the university about, the course and, of course, the university facilities, because it's not just about the degree, it's also about what the university has on offer for your student. Things like they need to live on campus. So what kind of accommodation do they have? How much does that cost? They may want to drive to university each day. So is there parking there? And if so, do they have to pay for parking, and how much is it? Or they need public transport. So how far away is the public transport? They need to also find out whether, things like whether they have international exchange programs, what kind of industry partners do they work with, and what kind of work experience can they get? Because that also can be something that will help them once they've finished their degree and moving on to the workforce. Now, going on from there, let's talk about preferences and what they are and how students should manage those. So preferences or course preferences are university courses that students, of course, want to apply for. So each course preference has a course code, and you can see that on the UAK website. And the course code indicates the course, the uni, and the campus that they would like to, of course, study at. Now, why is that it says campus? Because some universities have multiple campuses and they may have the same course over each campus, and each of those courses will have different course codes. So you need to watch out for that. Students, of course, can list up to 5 course preferences at any one time on the UAK application, and they can change them around as many times as they like throughout the whole process. Students, of course, should list their course preferences in order of their course choice. So meaning they should put their dream course as their first preference, and then after that be fairly realistic about what they have listed, and maybe even have a diploma course at the very end, especially if maybe if their ATAR hasn't come out the way they were hoping it would. If students want to be considered for other courses, they can, of course, change their preferences between each offer round. But first, they must, of course, accept any offer that they got in that last offer round. Okay, so they must accept the offer they received and then remove the offer from their preference list. Okay, now students do get a little bit worried about this. Okay, they think, well, if I remove it, does that mean it takes it away? Just encourage them to remove it. Okay, it's not going anywhere. They've already accepted it. But just remove it because it will act as a block and we won't consider any preference underneath it in the next offer round. All right, so I know you will understand that, but sometimes they get a bit worried about it. So just encourage them to accept it straight away, all right, and then remove it from their preference list so that they can be considered again. If they don't, and I've said this already, if they don't remove the original offer, it will block them from receiving something else. And by accepting an offer doesn't mean that they can't be considered again, because they absolutely can. So some facts about offers. Students can only receive 1 offer per offer round. So as I said earlier, there's 2 offer rounds per month from November right through to March, but only 1 offer per offer round. There are 2 offer rounds per month, as I said, once again, November to March. And November is, of course, when the SRS offers will be released to Year 12 students who have applied. From December round 2, that's when we start giving ATAR-based offers. If a student accepts an offer in November, they can still be considered for an ATAR-based offer. Once again, they would have to remove that offer, change their preferences around by the close of preference date to be considered in that first ATAR-based offer round. Students should, and I'm going to just reiterate what I've just said, accept the offer straight away that they get, because it could lapse. All right, what does that mean? It means that if they just leave it sitting there and they don't do anything with it, and we do see this happen, students will leave it thinking, well, I might just wait to see what happens in the next offer round. But if they do that, that offer will lapse, meaning the university will take it back and say, well, you didn't accept it, so you don't want it. So we'll take it away from you. So when you get it, just accept it straight away, or encourage them to accept it straight away. Then, of course, they will need to remove that current offer from their preference list, as we said before, then rearrange their preferences so they can add or subtract. They can do what they need to do before the close of preference date to be considered in that next offer round. Now, the dates for the change of preference and the offer days will all be on the UAK website from the 3rd of April. So we encourage you maybe to take a screenshot of those dates and put them somewhere handy so that you can prompt your sons or daughters to get on and do what they need to do. Now, if they get an offer or another offer, once again, they can do exactly the same thing. Accept that offer, remove the offer, change them around again for the next offer round so that they can be considered again. If they have, 2 or 3, maybe even 4 offers, then they really then need to make some really quick decisions about what course they're going to study. And once they've made that decision, they then need to go back to the universities that they are not going to study with and withdraw their acceptance, okay? Because if they leave it there, they could end up with financial or academic penalties, and you don't want that. So just encourage them to make their decisions as quickly as possible. Okay, well, I think that's just about it from me. I would really like to apologise for any of you that tuned in to our webinar this evening. We did have terrible technical issues. I do want to thank you for joining us here tonight. I hope you got some really great information to help you guide your student through their university entry process. And for more information, please subscribe to the Year 12 parent email, which we'll be emailing to you after this webinar. Thanks again.